I don't know whether I got the travel bug then. I think as a military kid, you definitely have a bit of a resilience because you kind of like have to move schools quite a lot. Yeah, you know, he was an officer in the Air Force as well, and there's this sort of, well, I better act as an officer's wife kind of thing, do you know what I mean? Although that went soon out the window. There was a radio station on the base, and it was for the British Forces Broadcasting Service, BFBS, and my friend said, "Oh, why don't we see if we can become volunteers?" And I said, "Oh, okay." Ronnie, my husband, had been in the military. He totally got it, and he had also been to Afghanistan a few years beforehand. So he was like, "Yeah, I really think you should go." I thought, "Oh my God, what am I doing here?" Honestly, it was so scary. Yeah, my heart was pumping that day, and I remember ringing home and saying to Ronnie that I was so scared. There is, of course, all those wonderful things that you can go and spend the day at the beach, or you can go and spend the day at the pool in a beautiful hotel. And that, of course, is your nice bits. But then there's the other bits that you are away from home. It's expensive to fly, you know. There's pros and cons, of course, with it.
Hi, and welcome to the There's Another Way podcast with me, Adam Halverson.
And me, Pete Dolby. And you've come to the place where each episode we'll be shining a light on authentic people who have chosen an alternative path to their new normal to find another way. Have you ever thought about leaving everything behind and forging a brand new life in a different country but never really quite had the motivation? Well, today we're having a conversation with Nicky Smith, a lovely lady who I've known for over 10 years, and we met during her spell living in the UK before she sailed off into the sunset on her next stop. We'll hear how work and curiosity has taken her and her family to live in places as far afield as Afghanistan, Cyprus, the Falkland Islands and Abu Dhabi. Oh, and even a trip to Australia from the UK for the day. I hope you enjoy this honest and open insight to life as an expat. Great. Well, welcome to episode 3, Nicky Smith. Hi, Nicky. How are you today?
Hello, Pete and Adam. How are you?
Yeah,
all good?
Very good, thank you.
It's great to have you on. We're really excited that you're dialing in. Now, I know where you're dialing in from today, but for the purposes of the audience, whereabouts are you dialing in from today?
Well, I am dialing in from the Middle East, from Abu Dhabi, which some people go, where's that? Is that Dubai? And we often get people saying, "Oh yeah, you live in Dubai," and we're like, "No, we live in Abu Dhabi," because the UAE, which is the United Arab Emirates, is made up of 7 emirates, and Abu Dhabi is one of them, and it's actually the capital. So there you go, little bit of history for you there.
And it's not too far from Dubai, is it? Really,
it's not.
45 minutes drive.
Yeah, 45 minutes, and a lot of people actually live in Dubai and work in Abu Dhabi and vice versa. So, it's super easy to get to Dubai. I think most people know Dubai, but Abu Dhabi is, right next door.
And it's a lot more chill than Dubai, isn't it? It's a great place to visit. So that's very exciting. You're our first guest to dial in from the UAE, so that's very exciting.
It's our first international guest, full stop, I think.
Woohoo!
We have Wales. Does that count?
Wales counts, yeah.
Well, I suppose so. Some people might class that as international.
There wasn't much of a Welsh accent there, but it was from Wales. So. Brilliant. So I guess let's take us back to the beginning, Nicky. So, obviously the theme of this podcast, we'll find out as it progresses, is I don't think I've ever met anyone that's lived in so many different places as you and your lovely family. Let's start from the beginning. So where you grew up and when the first kind of inclination for travel hit your mindset, where you first thought, right, this could be something I'm interested in, or was it something that you fell into when you met Ronnie?
Yeah, I think it probably was something I fell into, but having now lived overseas in an expat environment, there are very, very seasoned mover-arounders. I don't know what you'd call them really, but they really do live the expat style, if you know what I mean. So my dad was in the Air Force, and so when I was born, I suppose I was born in Swindon, and then we used to live in Oxfordshire area, and then after that, I actually moved to Wales. So yes, I've already been international. And after living in Wales, my dad then got posted to Germany. But we actually lived in the Netherlands. So we lived in the Netherlands and we went to school in Germany. So back then they used to have borders and we used to go over the border every day. And I had my own passport when I was 10 years old.
Wow.
So I felt very kind of like, and I had this passport, then we had to go to school every day in another country, which was a bit weird, really. And then after Germany, I then moved back to the UK, to Norwich, to Norfolk, where I then met my husband, Ronnie. And he too was in the Air Force. So then, of course, we moved to Cyprus, we came back to the UK. We moved to the Falkland Islands, came back to the UK. And then we thought that was it. Our travelling is done. But then we did one more stint to the UAE, and that's where I am today.
So travelling has been on the horizon for quite a while then. If you moved to Germany, and you were there for how long, sorry, did you say?
So I lived in Germany for 3 years. But of course, I was only 13 then, and 10 to 13 I was there. So it's quite exciting, but of course, as a kid, you're just kind of like following your parents, really, aren't you?
Yeah.
But, they're doing all the hard work. They're doing all the buying the cars with the different nationalities or the different admin stuff that you have to do. So you're just there as a kid, sort of like living it up, really, aren't you? So going to all these different places, but that was very exciting. I don't know whether I got the travel bug then. I think as a military kid, you definitely have a bit of a resilience because you kind of like have to move schools quite a lot, and you have to take on a different sort of persona, I would say, because you kind of have to get on with people quite quickly, make friends quickly because you're moving around a lot. And I suppose I was never then settled when my dad came out of the military and we sort of were in Civvy Street then, as they call it. I was never settled. I was sort of like, I'm getting bored with living here now. I want to move. Do you know what I mean? So then, of course, I met Ronnie, and then we moved, we got a posting. I was like, thank goodness for that. We're on our way to another place.
So after a period of time in one place, you kind of got bored, and you kind of, not preconditioned, but because you're used to moving around and meeting different people, I guess it just becomes part of your nature, and you want to move on to the next thing.
Yeah, and, some people would absolutely hate that because, as we know, there are some people that we meet that live in the same house even for the rest, for their whole lives, or the same village for their whole lives. And in a way, I have at times been very jealous of that sort of makeup, if you would call it that. Do you know what I mean? Because they're very content, they're very settled. Whereas I think for me, I'm kind of like always looking for the next, where can we go next? Where can we, should we move? I mean, even just moving, like in the same country, we've done that quite a few times. So, yeah, and I think we're probably due to move next year because where we are at the moment is a rental house and the landlord wants to sell it. So, and in a way, I'm quite excited about that. It's a pain in the neck moving, but I'm quite excited to be moving to another house. Do you know what I mean? So it's ridiculous.
But do you think the level? One of my questions I've jotted down to you is where's home, and do you think there's ever a place where you will feel comfortable that that's it, or do you think you'll continue moving around from place to place?
I never really know where to say is home. My mum and my sister live in Hereford because my mum was born and bred in Hereford. My sister decided to move there to be nearer to my mum. But I don't really know Hereford, so I would never go and live there probably. But I don't really know where I would want to actually settle. So, yeah, I don't really have a draw to anywhere in particular. I end up watching Escape to the Country like all the time and going, oh, that looks nice. Let's look up there. And it can change week on week where we would go to. But I think ultimately, after all this travelling and everything, really where your friends are, where most of your friends or, even not necessarily family, but, within close proximity, I suppose, that's really where your home is, I think. That's really where you can have your community, and it definitely all comes down to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess to add some context, obviously where Pete and I are sat in Nap Hill, there's a big RAF community around here. You mentioned that your dad was in the RAF. I'd love to just understand a bit more about what did he do, because obviously shaped quite a bit of your, I suppose your life future from there.
Yeah, so my dad used to be an airframe technician, and funny old thing, his dad was in the Air Force as well. And I think there is a tendency to sort of, I don't know, you obviously get it in your blood and you move around and see how the military operates, So yeah, my dad decided to join up after his dad was in. And yeah, he kind of like, our postings would often be like for 3 years.
Right.
And you'd often get places where you go to and you go, oh, this is good here. Yeah, enjoy this. And you would end up meeting some people that you were at another station. So you sort of already have automatic friends. But most people, when they move with the military, know that they're only there for a short number of years. So you just make the most of it, And some places you really are quite sad to leave.
Yeah.
And others you're like, oh, yeah, I'm ready to go now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. It's because obviously living here for us, my family having nothing to do with the RAF, it's been quite a bit to get our head around, because it is, I'd say where we are isn't necessarily that transient, but there is an element to that. For example, the school that my son is just about to leave, he only joined 2 or 3 years ago because we actually went to one which was less sort of RAF focused, because we were a bit worried that it was going to, people were going to come and go. But actually the experience that he's had of getting used to some people coming and going, but also how good they are at helping people settle in, who are potentially there for short term. I think it's really interesting. We've learned a lot from the process, actually.
Yeah, I do think that I actually think it's worse as an expat community for the transient feel. I think in the military, you maybe always know somebody else there, and you might stay longer than 3 years, to be honest.
Right.
But I think as expats, I think people tend to come and go even more. And especially in the Middle East, in this area, I think people really are only here for just a number of years and then they'll go. And I found that really difficult. Even though I've been sort of used to it, I found it so much worse here because people don't tend to see each other again. Whereas in the military, you knew that you would maybe bump into somebody on a course or in another posting, but definitely as an expat, you're probably not going to see them again. Do you know what I mean?
I guess you're coming from lots of different worlds, aren't you, where you are now? And if people know they're only there for a finite amount of time, do you find that they don't invest as much in the...
Absolutely, yeah. So much so that they think... Yeah, I think people are very much in their own contained little bubble in a way, that they're like, yeah, we're only here for like 2 years and then we're going, or that's where my family is, that's where my home is. So, yeah, they definitely don't invest as much efforts, you would say. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So going back to your first spell, did you say the first one was the Falklands, the first move that you did?
We moved to Cyprus, actually.
That was first.
Sorry, I might not have mentioned that one. But yeah, we moved to Cyprus when we first got married. So we got married in August. We moved to Cyprus in September.
Wow.
So it was that quick. And we were there. I know, that was for a 3-year posting. And
I guess you can you can double up as your honeymoon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honeymoon.
We did have a honeymoon in between as well.
Wow.
But yeah, that for me was a bit of an eye opener because.
Were you nervous about that move, or because you'd done it as a kid, as a family? Were you fairly comfortable with it?
I don't know. I think I was nervous, and I think actually I did have a bit of a steep learning curve because I was then going out there as an adult and as a married adult and, to my new husband and my first house with him and everything. So everything was a bit first, do you know what I mean? And, he was an officer in the Air Force as well. And there's this sort of, well, I better act as an officer's wife kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Although that went soon out the window. But do you know what I mean? That there's kind of like what's the word?
Expectation or no?
Yeah, expectation of what you're supposed to be like, I suppose. So
you're kind of getting used to that whole world as the wife of an officer and trying to figure
exactly. So there was all these sort of things to kind of like take on board. And when we first got there, we didn't have a house. Actually, they couldn't. We were on a waiting list, so we had to be put up in this temporary accommodation. And it was quite a trek to the main, it was on base, but it was actually quite a trek to the main part of base. And, Ronnie was taking the car to work, so I didn't have anything to get to the main bit. So I was a little bit isolated, I have to say. And on the first night we got there, Ronnie actually had food poisoning. So, I just arrived in Cyprus and he picked me up and then he's like chucking up down the toilet the first night I get there, So that was, we were only there for about 3 weeks and then we moved into our house and, and then absolutely got stuck in. But, it was definitely a learning curve because I was having to make new friends. I didn't have a job. And it wasn't very easy to get a job as a spouse then. There was a few rules. They used to have to give the jobs to the Cypriots, first of all, on the military base. So, but, of course, 3 years in, didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
So,
And how old were you then, Nicky? Were you in your early 20s then? Or what?
I was. I was very young. Young bride at 25.
But as a young, it's, to be 25 and then to take the decision to move abroad for 3 years, that's quite a big step, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose it is. I mean, I think, though, the military do look after you. Yeah. You're in a bit of a bubble. You're in, you're in a camp, so you're in a contained kind of behind the wire kind of thing. The post is sent to you. There's none of this sort of drama of setting up a PO box. Everything's, people are there to help you get your car. Where'd you get your first car? How'd you get it? Who's the best garage? People are just ready with advice. So there's no worries about trying to get all of that. And the biggest problem for us was trying to get our phone line sorted. That took 4 months back then to get connected.
It's a bit easier these days, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. But, then it was like, that was our lifeline, and of course, you sort of had your British telly sent to you as well, because it's all looked after by the military. So a completely different kind of way of living to living as an expat, because everything's just done for you.
Yeah. And you mentioned it was difficult to get a career. Just out of interest, what sort of were you leaning towards before you moved out to Cyprus?
Well, before I moved out to Cyprus, I used to be a dental nurse.
Oh, interesting.
And and then when I got there, I couldn't get a job as a dental nurse, but then eventually one came up working for the army 9 months into our tour. And I went to work for the army, and oh my God, that was a completely different sort of set of rules. You're dealing with some units that have to be deployed to, quickly, and you'll get the whole unit coming in, like 30, 40 guys just needing all of their teeth to be checked before they go out on deployment, there's a few different rules, and them saluting the dentist in the chair. That was it was just kind of it was just kind of weird. I didn't stay in that job very long. I didn't really enjoy being a dental nurse. I found it what's the word? I just, it was a bit of a quiet job for me.
Is it not creative enough for you?
No, you just have to sort of be in the background, really, doing all the cleaning. So,
right.
it wasn't really my thing. But, it got me a job, it got me out, got me to meet people. And, another string to my bow, I suppose.
And what did you think after that? You wanted to do something different. What were you thinking then after the dental?
Well, my friend, there was a radio station on the base, and it was for the British Forces Broadcasting Service, BFBS. And my friend said, "Oh, why don't we see if we can become volunteers?" And I said, "Oh, okay." It was more her idea than mine, and I'd met her having Greek lessons, actually, and neither of us learned a word of Greek, but we just decided to go along and have a go at the radio. Anyway, they were asking for volunteers to do the late night show, and
so we...
as a presenter. So we went along, and they showed us how to do the desk, and we practiced, and it was all CDs then, and we practiced pressing the buttons and talking to time, because you have to reach the news dead on the hour. And there was, that. Anyway, we learnt as a double header, and they call that like with two people in the studio. And then and then we were flying. The first night we were so nervous, but it all went okay. I think I've got a cassette of that first show somewhere.
Brilliant. You should keep that for the kids. But did you have to interview to get that? Oh, so were you the only two that turned up to volunteer?
I think we might have been the only two. Brilliant. I think they had other volunteers, but you had to stick at it because you had to practice and stuff. And actually she then ended up going back to the UK because her time was finished, and I then stayed for another year. So then I got more shows, and then they asked me if I wanted to do an earlier slot because there was some of the general presenters were taking holidays and stuff. So of course then I got more and more into it, and then I thought, I quite like this, and so I practically fell into being a radio presenter. So and then after that I came back to the UK, and then I worked for the BBC for a bit, and I did the traffic and travel for BBC Southern Counties Radio.
Wow. So, well, just before we get into that, I feel like, so just so you know, my dad's a dentist.
Oh my goodness!
So and I don't think he'll mind me saying that I think you made a wise career move. And actually, we've got a guest coming on who's a dentist. Quite excited about it. Who lives up in the Canadian wilderness. So, but again, I think definitely your transition from a dental nurse to radio was a wise one. But yeah, anyway, so I'm really interested to hear about the BBC. That sounds incredible.
Well, that was really me just trying to get my foot in the door, really, because when I came back, BFBS didn't have any jobs. And so I thought, well, I've got to look for other radio opportunities, really. The Southern Counties radio job basically was working at the police control unit, which is or was in Godstone. I don't know if it's still there. And basically it was looking or going into a control room, and they'd set up this little sort of portable desk. And we used to dial into the radio station on ISDN. And basically I used to look at all of the screens that were, or the cameras that were set up along the M25. So I could see all of the traffic from junction 2 to junction 17, 18. I think it sort of did the north side of the M25. And and basically you had to read the cameras, and depending on which way the camera was pointing depended on which way round the carriageway was going round. So A was clockwise, B was anti-clockwise. So I know all about my junctions and my M25 now. Do you know what I mean? So,
I've got visions of you moving to the US and doing it from a helicopter live over the...
That'd have been exciting, but no, I was in this very dark room, and I hate to say it, but I waited for accidents, because that really was my news. I was, if there'd been a massive pile up, I was keeping people informed and that was my, excitement of the morning. So, I saw some bizarre things on the cameras. Really weird things that people do on the motorway. It's bonkers.
Driving the wrong way down the motorway on the hard shoulder.
Well, there's that. You have people
getting changed on the hard shoulder. I suppose.
On the bridges that are flashing.
Oh.
You have animals on the roads. You have, I saw a car go on fire. Just weird and wonderful things that you see that people do on the motorways.
Amazing.
So. Yeah,
but I am interested because it's something I've always thought about. There must be a little bit more of a stringent sort of interview process than maybe you had with BFBS. I mean, do you have to sort of do people test your voice, or do they? I'm always fascinated on how how people get onto the radio.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people I think do community radio, hospital radio. And do you know what? And now I think a lot of people go to university and you can become student radio, and stuff like that. So I think a lot of it is by connecting with your local BBC station, doing a bit of voluntary work. I think a lot of it is luck, and just being keen, super keen, going to your radio station and doing it for nothing. And just being prepared to do anything, because there was another thing that I did when I was working for the BBC. I worked for a local station and I was like the promotion person. So, like when they do the Christmas lights switch on, and they have like the local radio station there, and I was like handing out leaflets for the So you sort of do anything just to get your foot in the door. If you see what I mean.
Absolutely.
For me as a woman as well, I don't think a lot of people like listening to women as much as they do men. And I think that is a bit of a fact that people say that. And women particularly don't like listening to women. So,
wow. Really?
Yeah. I don't know why, but, people go, oh, that voice is so high-pitched, And there are people that you can't stand listening to, aren't there? So
it's funny. I mean, I think over the years I've listened to lots of female radio presenters. I'm thinking Clara Amfo. I'm thinking Jo Wiley. And you obviously. I've listened to you many weekends here as well. I find it. It doesn't bother me at all.
But there's more male radio presenters than there are female. So if you think about it, now when you start listening, there's definitely more male presenters. And I went to a weekend conference kind of thing, and it was all of the radio presenters. Well, not all, everybody, but it's kind of like a big gathering of commercial radio stations from the UK. I can probably guarantee that it was 3/4 men, a quarter women. So yeah.
I didn't realise that. You mentioned your friend that you did Greek lessons with.
Yes.
We didn't learn any Greek at all. Yamas. Did you? What does she do now? Did she keep her career in the radio, or did she go into something else?
She actually went back to the UK and worked for BFBS, but in an admin kind of role. She didn't want to stay on the radio. And then she doesn't do it at all now. She actually owns a post office. So
there we are.
Yeah, but I have got her to thank, because she was the one that instigated it all, really.
Brilliant.
She was the one that dragged me there.
But it's a sliding doors moment, isn't it? Someone mentioned that and you thought, yeah, I'll go along, and here you are still doing it today. It's amazing, really, isn't it? And
it definitely is my sliding doors moment, because actually I don't really know what I would have done. Before I did any of that, my jobs really were dental nurse, receptionist, office worker. I didn't really have anything that I really wanted to aim at. I didn't get a degree. I haven't got any A levels. I haven't been to university. So literally, like you say, I have fallen into it.
I remember when I was a teenager trying to work out what I wanted to do and speaking to different people. So, you'll fall into something. I remember thinking, what? Yeah, sure, of course. But you've no idea. But it's little moments like that, like you say, that you look back on that do make the difference, and you do end up falling into stuff. It's funny how things work out. I would imagine over your time on the radio, you've interviewed some big names here and there, Nicky. Who would you say has made you the most nervous ahead of interviewing them, and which person maybe had the biggest impact on you, or was the most surprising person to interview? You remember?
Gosh. Well, do you know what? Some of them I've been going, I'm so glad I didn't interview them because I would have been too nervous. Do you know what I mean?
Really?
So,
yeah.
I remember I interviewed Boris Johnson but he was the mayor of London then. He wasn't like the Prime Minister.
Wasn't having a party.
Well, he was having a bit of a party.
Bet he was.
Yeah.
It was at the Invictus Games, the very first Invictus Games, which was held in London. And he was in the audience, and the Foo Fighters were on, and he was having a ball dancing. So we were catching some of the people that we were interviewing before. I remember I interviewed, what is her name now? I can't remember what her name is. It'll come back to me in a minute. A big operatic singer, beautiful, with blonde hair. Catherine Jenkins.
Oh, Catherine Jenkins.
Yes.
Yeah.
She was nice. Gary Barlow.
That was out in Afghanistan.
That was in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he came out to see us there.
You said he was very nice, didn't you? Nice
he
guy.
was so nice, such a nice guy. But yeah, and I did actually, I interviewed Jimmy Savile as well.
God.
I know. That was because it was the very last Top of the Pops, and he was like doing all the interview junkies, as it were. And that one I didn't have time to think about because somebody dropped out of doing the interview, and they literally said, "Nicky, come here quick, do the interview." So actually I didn't have time to get nervous because then, of course, he was a massive name. And then, the rest is history with that one, isn't it?
Wow.
So,
yeah, that, I can imagine that was probably an impactful interview for sure.
Yeah. I mean, he was just talking about the programme, really, about Top of the Pops. So, yeah. And it's funny with interviews because I think if you're prepared, then it's not so bad, and people can go off on tangent, obviously. There is an art to doing interviews, and I wouldn't say I was the best person.
I don't think we've learned that art yet.
Do you know what Terry Wogan used to say? You got to let people talk, and you got to let people, don't sort of jump in. You just let them breathe, sort of thing. They've got to say their answer, and then you say, because some people might be just thinking in their head before they're answering, and then you might jump in. But he was quite good at just letting people say their bit and more, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, it makes sense.
He was a master.
Yeah, so, and you get some people who are amazing. I tell you who else I like. Who's the Irish guy on a Friday night?
Graham Norton.
Graham Norton,
yes.
he's good. He's a good interview because, they get what you want to... And Louis Theroux, he's good, isn't he, as well?
He's brilliant. He's just got a real knack of...
getting the answers you want to hear.
Yeah. And from completely different walks of life as well. It might be a big prison in the States or whatever. He has a real knack of getting the information out of people, doesn't he? So,
yeah.
It's so true, actually, because when you listen to podcasts or whatever, or shows on the radio, it is really frustrating when you just want to hear that answer and then it goes down another path. You're like, I'm never going to hear that now.
Yes.
Yeah. I love the career side of things, but I think, for me as well, I'd love to get back to, the travel side as well. And, Pete, you already touched on like Afghanistan, for example, and I know you mentioned, Nicky, that you weren't in, let's say, in the firing line, but I think for me as well, to add some context to here, I think even when we've spoken before, I'm always thinking about what's next, and probably got that slight thing in my brain as well. But when Afghanistan came up, how did you guys feel about that one?
Well, within BFBS, we have stations all over the world, and we, to be honest, being where the forces are, people love it because they feel they can get in touch with the station a bit more. It's, it's closer to home. You're living, breathing, with the people that are on the ground. So, it was easy to be in Cyprus. That was a nice deployment. The sun's shining most of the year, and you can go to the beach and stuff. But yeah, we've got stations in Gibraltar, the Falklands, Brunei, Cyprus and Germany. But when Afghanistan and when these wars happen, we tend to get a station, and we've been in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it had been going quite a few years, the war, and we'd had our station quite a while, and nearly everybody had sort of done their bit as a presenter. We didn't have to go as long as the military. We were doing 12 weeks at a time, and it was voluntary. But I sort of felt that I needed to do my bit as well. And the kids were quite young for me then. They were like 5 and 7, I'd say, 5 or 6, something like that. And I didn't really want to leave them. But because I think Ronnie, my husband, had been in the military, he totally got it. And he had also been to Afghanistan a few years beforehand. So he was like, yeah, I really think you should go. And he'd manipulated his hours at work so that they would support him to support me. And yeah, and I can remember the day that I was going, I was petrified. And I was like, oh my God, this is like, what am I doing?
Well done you for going.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I remember absolutely bawling my eyes out. Actually, I cried in the house, but then when they came to pick me up, I was going with another colleague, and I thought I've got to man up here. So yeah, I was like, right, okay, this is it. Just try and put the kids to your back of your mind. And so just to be clear, so obviously it wasn't like Ronnie was going, so you sort of went with him, and then, it wasn't all based around just following sort of where Ronnie was going. No, this was me on my own, and he was staying at home looking after the kids, and I was going to Afghanistan. I went to Camp Bastion, and basically I was going to work on the radio, and we had a radio station there, and we had other presenters, we had reporters that were doing the news, and we had an engineer, a couple of engineers actually, and that was our setup. BFBS had a kind of all the rooms set up ready for us, and we sort of lived there. I mean, literally, you got out of bed, you went to work, you went to the cookhouse for food, you went to the gym, you came back to your room, you went to bed, and it was a little bit Groundhog Day, and that is what you did, like practically every day. Do you know what I mean? So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And what was the kind of content, that you were broadcasting?
So it was mostly kind of pop music, what was in the charts, with a bit of chat, and if there was anything going on the camp, like they used to have like 5k runs and 10k runs, or if Gary Barlow, when he came out, he did a bit of a singing competition, and we used to get them in to chat, and we used to do interviews, and we used to I don't know, if somebody had a new Keep Fit class happening, we'd get them in on the radio. I mean, it was it was all for morale, obviously. If there was anything to report, like, I don't know, like that your flight home was going to be delayed for any reason, if there was something that we needed to be aware of, we would report that on the radio. And everybody listened to BFBS, because it was your English station out in the middle of the desert, and we used to give free radios, so people used to pop into the station and get their free radio, because some guys were really out in the thick of it, in remote places where it was just them and their other colleagues, and really remote.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you have a drum and bass hour at 1 a.m. Most nights?
Do you know what? We used to have a drum and bass hour on VFBS.
There we go.
Yeah, we did. I don't know whether it was then, I can't remember, but mostly it was kind of, and the news, which I find becomes very important when you're overseas, we had live, and that was being broadcast from the UK, but on the hour. So basically, we have to do a clock start, as they call it in radio. So you have to stop talking on the hour, play your jingle in, and then the news gets like satellited, I suppose, with a live presenter doing the news. And of course, at that time as well, it was very important. So, with Afghanistan. It's quite a complicated setup, BFBS, because we have news and the headquarters in the UK, but we have all of these other stations that broadcast to different places in the world.
Sounds like quite a technical setup that you had there. So I would imagine that you had engineers there as well to help with all the sound stuff as well. So yeah, it's quite a team of people, and you were all contained within the same Camp Bastion with all the other regular military people and all the other medical people and everything else in one area, were you?
That's right. And, so you have various places to eat, and you all eat together, and it's, great big long tables and sort of buffet kind of style, but, just everybody's there in their uniforms and their kit, carrying guns and all sorts, it's I don't know, it was quite a simple way to be, though, in some ways. I never really felt in danger. There was one particular night when they used to do these like controlled explosions, and they used to announce it on the tannoy. So you had like tannoy going off all the time saying, "Stand by for broadcast, controlled explosion in 10 minutes. And then there'd be this massive bang, and you know that it was all sorted. But one day, one of those explosions happened, and nobody had been pre-warned.
Oh,
and everybody hit the deck in the cookhouse, and I thought, oh my God, what am I doing here? Honestly, it was so scary. Yeah, my heart was pumping that day, and I remember ringing home and saying to Ronnie that I was so scared. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I can actually remember that now. But that's probably, I was absolutely fine. Before I went, I nearly didn't tell my mum I was going, and I was going to pretend that I was still in the UK. But I had to fill out a whole bunch of security forms, and it included things like her date of birth and my dad's date of birth, which I don't know whether most people know what is their parents' date of birth.
No, I
don't. Yeah. So there was things like that, and she would have gone, "What do you need that for?" So yeah.
Yeah, just quickly, by the way, I bet the drum and bass hour was after the late night love affair, wasn't it?
Yeah,
but
I think it was.
Yeah, I do remember when you were away, actually, Nicky, because I think we had, I'm sure we had Ronnie and the kids over for food and stuff while you were away, but how was that feeling when you knew you were coming home? Must have been massively emotional and exciting.
It basically was very emotional, and I started crying on the plane before I even got on the ground, which was a bit embarrassing because I just couldn't contain myself. I was so excited to see the kids. They had been really my, me and Ronnie had been apart before through the military sort of deployments and stuff, and he went to Afghanistan for 6 months. But when you're a mum and when you've got kids, it definitely is different, and I just couldn't wait to see them. So I got very emotional even before we landed. And then I got my bag and I absolutely ran out into the terminal to see them. They were all waiting for me. They had banners and they had T-shirts made and everything. In fact, I still think that they've both got those T-shirts that they welcomed me home with. But Oh, my goodness me. Yeah, sometimes when I think about that, I almost well up, thinking about it. So it was a lovely moment to come home and see them all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's a phrase I really like, which is, you have to choose your regrets in life, as in it's not necessarily a negative, but it sounds like again you've made along the sort of some of that sort of career journey, but also like I think a lot of people have when you're mixing family life with career. It sounds like both you and Ronnie have had some difficult decisions to make, but it sounds like it's been so worth it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't regret going to Afghanistan. I feel I did my bit. And actually, it was really weird because both me and Ronnie did go to Afghanistan. And, now with the history of what happened in the last few years where we came out of it, and was it worth going into it? Politically, you can ask that. And what was the point of that when our guys got killed and stuff? There was a programme about it on recently, actually, and both me and Ronnie sat there, and we both felt very emotional watching that programme about, when we came out and watching those guys and girls in Afghanistan desperately trying to get out of the country, and the military that were there. And it was quite emotional watching that, And actually, it's funny because Ronnie's got a lot of pictures of people in Afghanistan. He was more in the thick of it. He was in Kabul, and he's got a lot of pictures of some of the locals, and he went there a long time ago, and he sometimes says, I wonder if they're still alive, or I wonder how old they are now, or it's quite poignant, really. But I mean, I did it. I enjoyed it. I had an experience. I got a medal. And, I sort of feel like I did my bit, and it's one of those life things you can look back on and go, yeah, that was, it's one of those things to remember.
Completely. I mean, and what a fantastic experience or life lesson it must have been doing that. And sometimes we need to push ourselves through these difficult decisions to come out the other side of it, don't we? Come out stronger.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't even begin to imagine being away from the kids for that amount of time must have been really, really tough. Well done you for that experience and putting yourself through it. I do remember you telling me a story. So that was a long trip away. I do remember you travelling halfway around the world for one night away once upon a time, didn't you?
Yeah, I
you want to
forgot
talk
about
to us
that.
about that?
Yeah, so we decided to go on a TV game show, and part of the show was that you were going to go to somewhere exotic, and then as the prize, you would get to stay there for a week on a holiday. So we thought, we're up for that. And we actually had to audition for that. We went to the BBC TV Centre and we had to play Pictionary together, massive Pictionary. And we got through from the audition and we didn't know where we were going, but the BBC sort of asked us a few questions like, how long have you got left on your passport? You need 6 months. If you don't, we'll renew it for you. And you need to have a tetanus up to date. So we didn't really need any exotic kind of jabs or anything like that. And then we got to the airport at Heathrow and they started filming and we were told we were going to Australia, to Sydney for the day.
Did you have any inclination where you might be going? Or clearly Australia wouldn't have been top of the list.
They sort of said you might need some
Core
hot
cats.
clothes or something, because I think it was our winter and we were going into their summer.
Right.
Anyway, the idea was to win, of course, this week's stay in Sydney, Australia. So we got on the flight and then they gave you a sort of a challenge on the flight, which was to make this puzzle, and you had to do it in the quickest time, and the people that didn't do it in the quickest time, they were the first ones out. So literally they landed and then they were going to go home. And then the next day was the next challenge. So we thought, we don't know how long we're going to be here for, so let's just go and climb the Sydney Harbour Bridge and just make the most of it, which we did. And then the next day we had to go to eat a whole load of bush tucker. So we had widgety grubs, urchins, just horrible stuff. And everybody ate it. Can you believe that? Nobody threw up or refused it. Everybody did it in each team. And so it went to a tiebreaker question. And the question was, how big is the Australian outback in square kilometres? And we were way over the top. So we were the next couple to go home. And we literally landed in Australia one day and left the next day.
Brilliant. So you literally flew to Australia, did the Sydney Harbour bridge climb, ate a couple of grubs and then flew back again.
Yeah, and in our passport it does say arrived on the 30th of January, left the 31st of January, something like
Brilliant.
that. So we literally spent a week on the plane, I feel. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We went via South Korea.
Oh, wow. Love to get out in South Korea.
But we didn't get out. We literally just went to the airport and that was that. But yeah, so, I was very excited that we might spend a week in Australia, but we didn't win. So never mind.
And was that broadcast on the TV?
That was on BBC Two at the time. So yeah, I'd love to find a copy of that somewhere, but I haven't been very successful in finding a copy of it. But
it'll be in the archives somewhere, won't it?
It will be. I mean, it was one of those shows that I think they only did one series and then it was scrapped. So, yeah. I don't know why we keep putting ourselves up for these things. Do you know what I mean? This is maybe it's the adventurers in us that, we're always up for the next. I mean, when we leave here, we've said, right, we're going to go on Escape to the Country.
Yeah, well, why
We're
not?
looking for the next TV show.
Adam's going to be on A Place in the Sun, so he might be on there before.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Absolutely.
I think he's watched every single episode 3 times.
I know, but you sort of like, oh, yeah, that looks exciting, doesn't it? Yeah, you sort of can't stop watching it because, it's the next.
Well, I think actually that's a good segue because, to be honest, Nicky, I can't remember we've spoken about this, but I wouldn't say desperate, but I'm verging on desperate to, frankly, experience some of the things you guys have. We love Portugal, love Spain, love all of those types of things, and obviously with career changes and all that kind of stuff, we've got no real need to to be based near London, a city, whatever. So I mean, would you say that you would recommend the journey that you guys have taken?
Yeah, and you know what? I think that lately the world obviously is a lot easier to be remote because there's a lot of people actually that are moving out here that they've got their own business and they don't necessarily need to be in the UK for any reason at all. So they've just decided to come and work remotely in a nicer country. And there's quite a few people that have done that. So, if you haven't got that tie, then why not? I think it's not for everybody. There are challenges. There's definitely, challenges that you might not think are challenges when you move overseas. I don't know, just getting your visa, getting driving. If you're a bit nervous about driving on the other side of the road, you've just got to bite the bullet and do it. Just things like that. If you are not up for a bit of hard work, then you're not really going to make it because there is, of course, all those wonderful things that you can go and spend the day at the beach or you can go and spend the day at the pool in a beautiful hotel. And that, of course, is your nice bits. But then there's the other bits that you are away from home. It's expensive to fly. There's pros and cons, of course, with it all the way. But I think, you know what, if you give it a try, and if you don't like it, you can always just go back, And
you still learn from that experience as well. Even if it turns out not how you'd expect it to, or you don't enjoy it, like you say, you can always go back. But, you still learn from the experience anyway, so it's win-win, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's it might be quite an expensive try because, you have to spend a bit on your removals and you are going to lose money in travel and all, putting deposits on houses and things like that. There's all of those to incorporate, but, I think if you're always thinking about it, then why not do it? There's a lot of online people that are just giving up their lifestyles now, aren't they? And just travelling in camper vans and things like that. And I follow quite a few of them because that's another thing that we'd like to do when we've finished, living out here, is maybe come back, go around in a camper van. I'm following this couple at the moment that have been in Japan and now they're in South Korea, and they're just travelling around in a camper van. And their motto on there is always, if you were told you only had 2 years to live, what would you do? And I'm like, would you stay in that job? Like,
absolutely.
Or would you just get up and go travelling and see the world? What would you do?
Well, and I think there's that saying, isn't there, which is, we're all going to die one day, and that's a good thing. And I know that's a weird thing to say, but it sort of, I think sometimes people don't realise that, so they don't squeeze these things in, or they, I think, if I look at our personal situation, we look at why we're not living in Portugal right now. It's pragmatism. It's, the kids are in school, it would be unsettling, or it's, but what if the business doesn't work? We're stuck there. But again, it's, I think eventually you've got to take that step, and I think what I guess has been great for you guys, I guess I can see, is you've had reasons to do it. I think that's sometimes which helps, doesn't it? Because it gives people the sort of reason to do it. And I think, for certainly just talking about my perspective, is actually it's just because we want to, and maybe that isn't enough, but who knows? Yeah, I mean, it's a leap of faith, isn't it? It's sort of, but there's a lot of help now. Like when we first moved to Cyprus, okay, we were in a military bubble, but Facebook wasn't around, social media wasn't around. Now there are tons of stuff you can get online about where you're moving to, who are the best removal companies. People answer all of those things online. There's podcasts about becoming an expat. There's, I think there's so much information that, you can be so prepared now. Whereas before, I think you were just moving into a bit of the unknown. And I follow a podcast actually called Two Fat Expats, which is basically set up by two ladies who were, as they call, trailing wives. And they talk about, and on there's expats from everywhere in the world. And if you've got an issue going on in, I don't know, China, and you want to go, where's the best place to, set up a removal company, or I don't know, best place to find the schools and all that lot. People are living out there, or people have lived out there, and they can give you all the advice you need. So you're not alone, really. You've got all these people to help you out, and it's amazing, absolutely amazing. I think you do have to be quite brave to go and live overseas. And I think if it's not your thing, just don't do it. But if you maybe want to experience it, then do it, But yeah, it has got to be right for you and your family. Because, kids, age, school, it is harder with a family rather than just the two of you.
And just on that, because obviously when you were younger, you travelled and lived in different countries, and obviously your lovely kids have as well. Do you think when they're older they'll inherit a similar path? Do you think they will move around, or do you think they will?
No, I think Sam, my eldest, would. Isla has already said, when I am not living with you anymore, I never, ever, ever want to live overseas ever again. I don't know why she's got this idea. I think, and I'm hoping that we haven't sort of tarnished her, but who knows? Of course, she says that now, but
she might appreciate it one day, mightn't she?
She might. But I think she's a real home girl, and she misses England, and I mean, we all miss. It's funny as well. That's another thing. When you live overseas, you really crave what you don't have, and then when you're back, you're like, oh, okay. But actually, I think we call it a UK fix. It's like we need to go to the pub. We need to have a roast dinner. We need to have fish and chips. We need to just have those things that remind us of home. I need to go to Tesco's. Do you know, it's ridiculous things like that you just need to do just to make you, and every so often you get that real craving for silly things like that, you know.
I can personally vouch for that, Nicky. I felt that exact same thing living in America years ago and different countries. You really miss it. Your mind plays tricks on you. You forget all the negativity. It shines a light on all the positivity, and you miss it massively. And you come back for a few weeks and you think, this is amazing. And then after a while you think, I'm ready to go.
I know. It's like you need to have a little top up.
Yeah.
Top up of all your favourite stuff. Of course, see all your family and friends. That's, you know, a no-brainer. But, you know, all those other things make you feel like, oh yeah, I'm back at home now, this is nice. And then once you've done that for a few weeks, it's almost like you can carry on for a bit, and then, you know, you start dipping again, then you start needing it again. But, you know, I think the UK will always be my home. Whether I decide to live overseas for retirement is another thing, but I think the UK will always be home. So
I think my last question on this is, you know, honestly, because one of the issues I have is, okay, I've travelled to uni and, you know, this, that and the other, been a lot of places with work. But I mean, you know, do you how would you reflect on the UK from living in so many other cultures and ways of life? You know, would you, because it's so easy to sit here and think, oh, you know, it's November, it's crap, and, you know, the woods are gonna start getting muddy, and, you know, there's only so many times you can go to the pub. You know, how would you sort of? I mean, I do a good job, so that's fine. But
keep researching it.
Keep researching different pubs. But you know, what would be your reflection, sort of, from living in so many different places?
That's a really good question, because we sort of ask this question ourselves of what we think of the UK. You know, now that when you're not in it, you do see it in a different perspective, and you do see other countries, the way they do things and the way that the UK isn't doing things. And I think that people in the UK, this is going to sound terrible, but I think people in the UK think that the UK is the be-all and end-all. And there is a big wide world out there that other places are doing some things better, if you know what I mean.
Doesn't sound terrible. That would be my expectation.
Yeah, the great in Great Britain is not so great anymore, unfortunately. Sadly, I think it's gone downhill even since we've left. I feel slightly nervous to come back to the UK, to be honest. You know, not just the sort of the cost of living crisis which is happening at the moment, but I would say from a crime point of view, from a safety point of view, just all those kind of things. I think slightly a bit out of control, if you see what I mean. I quite like the UK, though, for having a democracy, but here, where we live now, it's very much, you know, not. So, you know, a middle ground would be quite nice. And actually, I'm sure there's really nice places to retire and live. I don't want to retire here. In fact, I can't. You're not allowed to, after the age of 60, be here as an expat. But yeah, you know, where is the best place to live in the world? I have no idea.
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, it's really interesting. And I think, you know, again, it's not necessarily negative about the UK, is it? It's just when you see different things, different ways of working, you know, like you said. And I think sometimes I find it so easy where people just assume that these you know, other places that seem so foreign and so different, and, you know, they may not have a democracy, they may not have the type of sort of ideology that we have, but everybody assumes that's bad, when actually when you live in it, you know, it gives you that different insight and different experience, and, you know, who knows, maybe different could be better.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know where we'll end up. But at the moment we're enjoying the ride. It's not perfect, and nowhere is, of course. But at the moment, the world is a bit of a mess.
Yeah, it does seem that way.
Yeah, I think you're right. That nowhere is perfect, is it? It's just finding that place that resonates and gives you, it ticks enough boxes. And I guess it sounds like you're still trying to work out where that will be.
I do think, though, and a lot of people felt this in COVID, that we really missed our community. And that really is the heart of it, And whenever I come back to the UK, it's seeing all my friends and my family again. And that really is what fills my heart up. Do you know what I mean? That's what I miss when I'm overseas, is having my really close friends. And somebody said it's like putting on an old pair of slippers. And it is, you can just come back and just be you, and you can just be normal kind of thing. And I do miss that. But I think everybody misses that, of course, when they live overseas.
Well, it's interesting, Nicky, because we're in the same boat as you. Okay, we've stayed here for longer, and you've moved on. But you mentioned at the top of the show about you sometimes look at people that have lived in the same place all their lives with envy, because they've got their network, they've got everyone that they know and love around them, or most of them, Whereas you guys have moved around so much, you've got people all over the place. So it gives you a great excuse to go and travel and see them. But, sometimes having everyone in one place, I think you do look with envy, don't you, when you don't have that? Yeah,
I do. And I think, God, you're so contented. You've got, when you see these families that have got granny living 2 doors down and, I mean, me now, personally, I just don't think I could cope with my mum living 2 doors down. But I sort of, I've sort of been and done the world and sort of seen a little bit too much now. But I think if I'd have maybe have just lived in one place, I wouldn't know any different, maybe. Yeah. And I would be content. Now I'm kind of always looking over the fence sort of thing. So,
yeah.
Yeah, there's two perspectives, isn't there? And I think it's what your personality is as well, isn't it, really? But I think the older I get, though, that makes me sound like an old granny as well. But the older I get, I'm sure I'm going to go, do you know what, I'm a bit fed up with all this moving around and stuff. Do you know what I mean? So,
absolutely.
I mean, it's stressful moving. It is stressful,
But I think for me, that's probably a pretty good place to wrap up. I think, one of the things that Pete and I talk about a lot is community. And, as someone who is really excited about what the next phase could bring in life, I think that's the hardest wrench for us as well, which is that community. But again, it's that choosing you can't have everything. And I think, just from my sort of perspective, to sort of maybe slightly bring things to a close, I just think well done you guys for having the bravery, for choosing a life full of adventure and the ups and downs, I guess, that come with that. But I think it's really inspirational, and I think just wanted to say as well, thanks so much for the honesty as well, because I think it's very easy when you make these big decisions that you want to polish it, or you want to sort of try and give a perspective of that everything is perfect, and we all know that life isn't Instagram. It's not always just, it's not the beaches, it's not the cocktails by the whatever. So no, I think it's really, really inspirational to hear it, and I think a lot of people will find the same. So yes, thanks, Nicky. It's been really amazing to get that insight.
No problem at all. Yeah. It's a roller coaster ride like everybody, but mostly it has its ups.
Yeah. Well, I'd echo exactly what Ads has just said there, and I'm very grateful that I've experienced a small part of those little ups and downs along the way, be it here or in the UAE, and when you get to come back and enjoy the UK when you're here as well, staying with us. So, thank you very much for speaking to us today and talking about your amazing history and all your travelling experience. And I'd just like to close with one final question, if I can, Nicky. Given your experience in all those different countries and all the people you've met, if you could go back to 18-year-old Nicky in Norwich, what, and you could give her one piece of advice based on your experience now, what would that piece of advice be?
Go for it. a bit more than I did. I was a little bit nervous, I think, on some things I haven't had the opportunity to experience, and I think I should have gone for it a bit more. Well, wasted opportunities.
It doesn't sound like you've had any wasted opportunities. I think there's a lot of people.
No, I could have joined the Navy. Right. I got my call to join the Navy and I didn't do it. Then I got the call to be a Butlins Redcoat and I didn't do it. You know, so yeah, just some things like that I've sort of regretted a bit, that I should have just grabbed. You know, I don't know, just opportunities like that. You know. Sometimes I have been a little bit nervous to go for these things, and I think I should have just gone for it a bit more. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's really interesting that you have those regrets, because I think for most people you'd be an inspiration, and I think there are a lot of people that would wish to have as few regrets as you have, and would probably wish to do a lot of the stuff that you have. So it's really interesting to hear, but lovely.
Yeah, and I think that's just such a great, you know, I don't know, slogan, whatever you want to call it, simple 3 words, go for it. Mm-hmm. And I think if a lot of people can learn that earlier, you know, and again, by doing this podcast, hopefully people, you know, don't sort of spend their lives in their 20s thinking, oh, I've got loads of time, you know, I can just, you know, kind of sit back, watch Netflix for hours, rather than actually build a life that they really want. So I think that's a great summary.
Yeah, I agree. Nicky, you're a superstar.
Fantastic.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for...
Well, I hope it's okay.
Yeah, it's amazing. We've really enjoyed having a chat and hearing all about your adventures. So thank you very much.
Oh, there we go. Little did you know, I used to be a dental nurse. I can't believe your dad's a dentist as well. Oh my God. That's so funny. Wait, I think I'm starting to fade.